Good evening and welcome to the Horror Screams podcast. We are part of the Horror Screams Video Vault Network, and this is episode 38 of our podcast. Welcome. I'm Stephen, and we are here today once with our regular host, Sarah. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good, thank you. How's you?
Yeah, all right, thanks. Yeah, yeah, not bad. Yeah, it's the end of March, Sarah.
It is, and that means that there's another seasonal episode approaching.
Yes, welcome. Yes, of course, it's the holiday everyone's talking about, not the Easter Bunny horror movie thing. It's April Fool's Day coming up, which we all celebrate, do we?
Do we?
Do we do the April Fool thing again? People do that still? I don't know.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it is still a thing, but it's definitely something that you kind of grow out of, I guess. Maybe, depending on how immature you are.
Yes, I mean, I suppose that's that. I guess it carries on in the workplace, someone comes in and says, "Oh God, I just heard your entire family's been killed in a house fire." What? April Fool?
Yeah,
Oh,
there is always something on the radio as well. I don't know about you, but I am one of those incredibly gullible people that literally just goes, "Oh my God, really?" and believes
yeah,
anything that you hear on the radio, most things. And then
totally.
someone will go, "No, it's actually a load of bollocks, it's April Fools." And you're like, "Oh, for God's sake." And I only just, realised in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years that apparently it doesn't go on all day.
It's the morning, isn't it? It
I
stops.
know,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't even know that until like a few years ago.
There you are doing all the pranks until midnight that day.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a heron in the garden. What?
No one knows. But yes, I think
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I used to think that would go on like it was like a whole day thing. But yeah, we do have a couple of films dedicated to April Fool's Day.
So we are going to be talking about April Fool's Day and April Fool's Day, the films that are called April Fool's Day this
Yes.
evening. Yes, from different eras. One there's perhaps not that much to say about, so that might be quite short and sweet, or short and sour. But the other one is an 80s thing, and of course it's all about the 80s. There's a lot of 80s in the 80s part of this April Fool's Day. It's none more 80s than the 80s April Fool's Day, which is obviously a good thing.
It is a
So
good
yeah,
thing.
about that. Yes. So yeah, you can celebrate the day of playing cruel and possibly psychologically damaging tricks on your loved ones once again.
Yeah. I mean, the 1986 April Fool's Day definitely does have a lot of pranks in it and gives you quite a few ideas.
It does actually. Yeah. Well, it's one massively ambitious, most outrageously ambitious prank, which the fact that she kind of pulls it off is quite something.
She is like the top prankster, isn't she? Our Muffy.
Yes, totally. Good old Muff. Yes. But as we were saying before the show began, in the old green room backstage,
Mhm.
there is another movie from almost exactly the same. We're going to be talking about April Fool's Day 1986, just in case anyone had any doubt. But there was a movie shooting in England at the same time called Slaughter High, which started life as April Fool's Day, but then the Paramount were making the other April Fool's Day, and they were forced to change the title. But if you haven't seen it, Slaughter High is really worth watching. It's a very, very typical slasher movie. Starts off with a prank gone wrong. Like there's this nerdy kid called Marty, I think, and he's tricked in a very similar way, I suppose, to the start of things like Terror Train, where he's a bit of a nerd and the cool kids kind of play a very cruel prank on him. And I think in Terror Train, the guy is burned, but I think in Slaughter High, he has his face covered in acid. I think that's what happens.
Ah.
And then, of course, the rest of the film is Marty taking revenge on the students at a reunion, I believe. I think they have a reunion a bit later. It's a weird one because it's British, and there's clearly a lot of British people doing dodgy American accents. I remember that. And even more hilariously is Caroline Munro from the Hammer films. in the mid 80s pretending to be a teenager, even though she's clearly about 38, even more than
Ooh.
Grease
Even
or
more than the guys in April Fool's Day.
in Porky. Yeah, because these guys are clearly late 20s, I suppose, a lot of them, aren't they? Um, but Caroline Munro is not fooling anyone as a teenager in Slaughter High, and she's terrible. I mean, as much as I like Caroline Munro, she's awful in Slaughter High. It's a terrible performance. But then it's not helped by having to be saddled with some kind of mid-Atlantic twang. However, it's proper nasty. It's quite fun, and there's some proper good kills in Slaughter High. It seems it's maybe been left behind a bit. There was like an Arrow DVD release a few years ago, and I think there's probably a Blu-ray in America, but it seems like one of those ones that's going to come out with a fresh release at some point.
Ooh,
But
nice.
so that's the alternate. What could have been April Fool's Day, but instead was actually quite a good name. Slaughter High sums it up quite nicely. But that is built around the cruel prank gone wrong on April the 1st. The poor old Marty. He has like a jester's outfit. He's kind of a jester, I think, at least at times. I think that's his like slasher disguise of choice,
Okay,
which I,
interesting.
I always
I
quite
suppose it's
like.
kind of quite, yeah, themed. Fool.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That works quite well. It's actually, the more I talk about it, the more I kind of fancy rewatching it. But yeah, it's good. It's got proper big 80s hair and everything. Oh yeah, it's 10 Bonnie Tylers out of 10 for Slaughter High.
Ah, fantastic.
But yes, it's all about. Well, there are two versions. I mean, April Fool's Day came out in 86, and the remake 2008, which was that time, I suppose, where even the kind of second string slashers were being remade. So,
Mm,
I mean, the first April Fool's Day, the original, I was watching some of the extras at some point recently, and I mean, it wasn't even a hit. It didn't do very well because no one knew whether it was a comedy or a horror. Um, the marketing was a bit weird, so going in, you wouldn't quite know, well, what is this. Um, so
I
it may
suppose
have
that
been
is
one of
the
those ones.
genius about it, isn't it? I guess I can
Yes,
kind of get why it was confused at the time, but I think that's why people still love it now.
yeah, it's aged well, and I suppose
Mm,
um, as we'll come to it, but like a bunch of these later slasher films in the 80s, when you get past kind of the first few Friday the 13th, then obviously they had to kind of do new stuff to keep the thing fresh.
yeah.
And you do basically see loads of movies like this, which were maybe not so much this one, but a lot of them were doing the kind of stuff Scream was doing long before Scream. They were doing all the self-referential stuff, they were doing all the
Hmm.
spoofs, all the twists where it's a Shaggy Dog story.
Yeah.
Um, so the what Scream did in '96, it did very well, but there was nothing original about deconstructing the slasher movie or making it a bit of a spoof. But yeah, this does it really well. So yes, why don't we launch into it, Sarah, like a crazy, crazy person, and talk about April Fool's Day. 1986. I was 8 in 1986. Oh, such a cutie.
Oh, I was 6, 5 or 6.
That's so young. I'm still gonna
So,
be
so
it.
young.
Yes, yeah. And I remember, I mean, I was lucky to have parents that would let me watch anything. I remember watching this when it came out on video. And I suppose that would have been about 87 in the UK when it came out on video. So I've been really young when I watched this the first
It's got to
time.
be a really good one to. It is a kind of a cool transition horror movie because it has
Mm,
horror elements, it has scares in it, but it doesn't have anything massively graphic to it, does it? And the
no,
ending just totally like lightens the whole mood. So it would be, would be a really cool film to watch as a young kid because you'd see some awesome pranks as well. It's all about the pranks.
yeah, totally. Yeah. It's very endearing, this one. And actually, I suppose as time goes on, the weird thing is that in the period, the not this one, but the Friday the 13th movies were kind of controversial because they were considered to be quite nasty. But when you watch those these days, from our jaded 2023 viewpoint, especially, they're extremely kind of fluffy by comparison with
Mm.
the grinding gore of the Saw movies or something, which are very mean spirited. Um, but yeah, these movies are all quite fluffy and cuddly to watch, and this one especially. I mean, this is the fact that a lot of it takes place in daylight, in sunlight as well, on this
Yeah.
beautiful setting, which I think is kind of is British Columbia, and you can kind of see some of the scenery in the background is very pretty, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah, it does. It's still like kind of it kind of grabs you. It's creeping, and you're kind of on edge as you're watching like the pranks unfold and the kills unfold, because it all starts off so innocent, and then when start people start getting like knocked off one by one, it kind of gets more and more gruesome, but without really
Yes.
showing anything. If that's a way I can say it. It's kind of hard to describe. It is very hard to describe. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's all kind of like revolves around Muffy, who gathers a bunch of her friends together to come and stay at her house over the April Fool's weekend. They're calling it a weekend. See, in the 80s, April Fool's Day lasted for a weekend. So I don't know
Yes.
quite how we've lost so much of April Fool's now. It's only half a day, but to them in the 80s, April Fool's was a whole weekend. So she invited a bunch of
Summers
her
last
friends
forever.
to her house to stay with her for the weekend over April Fool's. And I guess they just kind of thought they were all going to get together, just have a nice time, hang out, play a few like harmless pranks on each other. But it all starts off quite harmless and quite chummy. Apart from the trip over, you kind of notice that things are going to be a bit sinister. So you have a kind of like strange ferry driver that meets them and drives them over to the island. And on the way over to the island, the boys are like just playing around, and for some reason they've got a flick knife and are like flicking it into the floor and stuff like that. And then one of them throws at his mate, and he looks like he gets stabbed. And that turns out to be a prank, but then someone falls off the ferry and gets crushed by the ferry, that kind of thing. That's when you think things are going to be serious, because then the police get involved. And that's before they've even arrived. So when they do arrive at the house, they kind of like, one of their friends is taken to hospital, and then the pranks start up again at the house and kind of get worse and worse and worse, and people start dying one by one.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great setup. Yeah, it's that. I mean, it is. Oh, it's such a. I mean, slasher movies are kind of this anyway, but it's such an Agatha Christie setup. It's basically
Yes.
quite. I like Agatha Christie. It's 10 Little Indians, really. I mean, complete with the private island or the mansion where Muffy lives. Muffy's obviously from big money, isn't she?
Yeah.
And although even at the start, the nice thing about it is because you have all this kind of spoofy stuff, like it starts out with those kind of home movie straight to camera intros of the characters, which are just a piss take because they're not really proper intros. Um, but it still instills a kind of sense of chilliness because there's that sequence, I think it's the title sequence, where it shows Muffy with the music box
Oh
and
yeah.
the thing leaps out of it. But there's a hint from the start that Muffy's not quite all there, isn't
She's
there?
not
There's a
quite
sense
there.
that
Yeah, something sinister has happened in her past. Well, you're led to believe.
yes, and even whenever which we'll come to, and we'll totally spoil it along the way, but even when you come to the
Absolutely.
ending, you're still left. Whatever happens in this film, you're still left with the feeling that she
Questioning.
genuinely is disturbed. Whatever's been staged or not,
Mm.
there's something wrong with Muffy.
I
Maybe
mean,
because she's
you've
called
kind of got to
Muffy.
think. Well, yeah, probably being called Muffy was probably like the start of it. The bullying she probably went through, bless her. But yeah, I mean, you've got to be slightly disturbed to come up with like some of the twisted pranks that she did come up with.
Yes, well, that's just it, isn't it? And it's
She goes a bit
yeah,
too far at
yes.
times.
Yeah, because it's a real disconnect. It's because there's a lot of schoolboy stuff with like funny glasses and dodgy falling chairs and
The falling
the
chair is one of my favourite. They keep doing it
it's
to the same
hilarious.
guy as well.
Really impressive. Yeah, yeah, exactly. The old exploding cigar gag, that's in there.
Yes. I like I
Totally
like
not.
I like the way she's thought out like the individual pranks for everyone that's going to be staying in a particular room, like the water that hits Nikki that kind of backfires on her, the exploding cigar, um, the chair. But then the prank they play on Nan is a bit cruel.
Oh, yeah, yeah, the baby. Is that the baby? The
The
recording of
baby,
the.
the recording of the baby, yeah, it's a little bit cruel. Kind of sets her off. Probably
Yeah,
not.
it's a really good cast. Yeah, Nan's the studios because it's still a cast of particular slasher movie types, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
She's
there
the
is.
clever
Yeah,
one reading
yeah,
Paradise Lost,
yeah.
and is dressed sensibly.
Hmm.
Um, there's the horny one that's a bit of a jokester who films everything. Is he what's his name? Is he Chaz?
We've got Chaz, yeah, and then there's the Arch or Arj or whatever he's called, Arch,
Oh,
the
Arch is
one with the
Thomas F.
chair.
Wilson. Yeah,
Yes,
which is quite a catch, I think, because he's Biff in Back to the Future, and
yeah,
I'm thinking this was after Back to the Future, so yeah, it's quite a catch to have him in there because he's while no Michael J. Fox, he's still a big part of one of the big films around that time. Yeah, he's really
hmm,
good. I liked Arch. He's kind of
yeah.
the horny kind of jokey one.
He has
Um,
quite a good death as well.
yes, yes, he does. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Circumstances set up for that make it kind of look scarier than it actually was. And then you've got Amy Steele in
yes,
it as well. They kind of borrowed her as well.
yes, which makes sense because this is a Paramount movie. The Friday the 13th movies at this stage were like five-ish deep. I think six was out the same year this came out, and Amy Steele was really the best of the Friday the 13th final girls. I always thought she's really good in
Mm,
part two and really likable. You really root for her in part two, I think, and it's helped by it being one of the scarier ones. That one.
what do you think
Um,
of her in this though?
doesn't have a lot to do. I mean, it's
Mm,
straight because of the nature of it. I think she's fine, um, but she doesn't have. She's technically, although as when we come to the twist, it changes it. But she's technically the survivor
mm,
with her kind of moody, not very interesting boyfriend Rob.
mm.
Um, but yeah, she doesn't have a huge amount to do. But then the very nature of this film is that it's not a it seems like it's a conventional setup, but ultimately it
Yeah.
isn't. So the usual extended kind of 20 minutes of all those Friday movies where they're being chased and they fight off Jason or whoever doesn't really happen because it has to twist into the final act, which is different, isn't it? So I
Hmm.
suppose she misses out on shoving a pitchfork through Jason, that
Yeah.
kind of action.
Yeah.
Uh,
She kind of plays a bit more of the victim, um,
yeah,
rather than a final girl. Although, like you say, she does kind of make it to the end, and she does figure out what Muffy wants her to figure out anyway. Although she
yeah.
kind of comes to that conclusion quite quickly. I think they kind of ran out of the time, and they're like, "Damn it, we haven't gone over the plot very much. We better just make it really obvious as to what's going on."
there's there's what do you have? He's here, Hal, he's the guy from Texas or something. The kind of yeehaw, the pompous guy, the guy in
Harvey,
the suit. Harvey,
yeah,
yeah, he's in it as well. And the
he.
other one, yeah, yeah, Harvey.
I like Chaz. I thought Chaz was good.
Yeah, Chaz is
Um,
really good.
Arch is funny. Harvey doesn't have an awful lot to do either. Um, but he gets freaked out by his kind of pranks in his room, which is quite funny. I think
Yes. Oh
I
yeah, of
suppose
course, yeah.
the most kind of annoying one for me was Skip, the guy at the
Oh
beginning.
yes. Yeah.
But I do quite like when they like find his body and stuff. That was kind of cool how he kind of floats through underneath like the boat shed and stuff, and they see him through the slats in the wood. That's kind of cool. That's
Yeah,
kind of
that's a creepy
the
moment. Yeah.
first time you actually see anything of any kind, because you don't see anybody particularly get killed. You kind of see what
Yeah.
happens. You see what happens to Arch because he gets his leg caught in a trap and kind of gets lifted up and a snake jumps out. But you
Yeah.
don't actually see what happens. You don't see what happens in the well. You just kind
No.
of see like the aftermath, which does like properly traumatize Nikki.
Oh yeah, she's quite likable. She's quite funny. She's the sort of the more experienced girl, isn't she? She's that
Yeah,
character that would
yeah,
never survive in a conventional slasher movie. as proven by the scene where she does one of those multiple choice sex quizzes from some kind of
Yeah.
magazine or something, which is never a good sign in a slasher movie of the 80s. Yeah, she's really good. It's a nice, I think it's a nice bunch
Yeah,
of
it's a
sort of
good balance.
typical, yeah,
Some
with
of
a bit
them
more.
have less to do than others, but they're all quite likable.
Yeah, and the build up of the mystery, I think, is quite good. I like the old fashioned stuff. I like the eyes follow the old fashioned, eyeballs in the paintings that follow you around the
Yes,
room.
yes, that's really
It's really
funny.
nice.
That is really funny,
Um,
when, especially when it turns out to be one of the cat clocks.
yeah, they take the picture of. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that
which
was
is
one of
quite
the
good.
funny pranks as well. The eyes behind the portrait, and then the lights being linked together. So when he switches one light off, another light comes off. So he has to get up and walk around the room to switch the lights off. I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, and in a way, it all adds to it being a bit unsettling because you don't know where it's going. And I think maybe because by its very nature, it can't show you the killings because, as we'll come to realize later on, they don't actually exist. So
Yeah.
I suppose the more astute people watching a film called April Fool's Day, with the fake outs early on, including before the guy falls off the boat, there's a kind of fake out, as you say, with the switchblade.
Yeah.
Um, I suppose the more switched on people might go, actually, is it suspicious that we're not actually seeing anyone actually die on camera?
Yeah, true.
Could
It's
this
for all
be?
us like gullible people that don't that haven't clocked onto that yet, and they're like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, because of course in slasher movies and the Friday movies always had one of these. There's always a prankster character, like Shelley, the kind of chubby one in Friday Part
Yes,
Three, stages his own throat slashing. He falls out of a cupboard with his throat, because he's a
yes,
guy that knows makeup. And he's the guy that ultimately gives Jason his mask because he's fooling around wearing
yes.
a hockey mask and leaves it somewhere. So this is like a feature-length version of Shelley's work or the
Shelley's
prankster
pranks. Yeah,
character. Um, but what I think is cool is Deborah Foreman, who's a really, I don't think she acts anymore, but she was in a bunch of 80s stuff like Waxwork. She plays Muffy. She's in Sundown, the one with Bruce Campbell as Van Helsing.
oh yes.
She's really good, and I always thought
Hmm.
she should have maybe probably wouldn't become a big star, but I always thought she maybe should have got some, a lot more work because she's very good in this at being underscoring this kind of jolly good show prankster character with something more unhinged.
Yeah, a little bit disturbed, but not quite sure what or why or what she's
Yeah,
gonna do next.
totally. Yeah. Um, it's still suspenseful. I think it
It
helps that it has
is.
that quite shocking bit with the guy that falls between the boat and has his eye hanging out. I think that's a
Yeah,
genuinely good bit you
that's a
don't
good
expect.
start to the film. Yeah.
'Cause it does, yeah, because it means there's some stakes. Otherwise, without that bit, it would be, there's, the pranks, and then people do the slasher thing of wandering about on their own at night time, and it does the whole cat scare thing,
Yes,
um,
literally.
which thrown into the frame of thrown from the other side by some guy on the other side of the camera. Um, yeah, no, I think the build up works even when, as in this case, we know what's happening. We know the outcome. Um, the well's a bit creepy. I think the body's in the well.
The well is really creepy. Yeah, wells are kind of a creepy thing to have, and people climbing around and splashing around in dirty well water just never bodes well, does it? It's always just creepy and ugh.
Yeah, and it does do the slasher thing of piece by piece, kind of filling out what you know is going to end up being the important stuff you should remember, like all those bits
Yes,
of newspaper
at
about
the
an
start, the
accident.
car crashes and stuff. Yeah,
Yes, and the
and the
photos
sinners.
that are around the
The,
house of twins.
yes, but then like they try and like throw you off. Like you see some. I think it's when Arch gets caught. You see like really like a guy's boots or something coming towards him.
Oh yes, of course,
That throws
yes.
you off the scent of Muffy.
Yes, it does. Yes, of course, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, which is sort of what you would be prepared for, a Jason-ish manly figure, but then
Yeah,
you're
it
suspecting
does.
Muffy is up to
It
something.
puts you back down like the slasher route of like there's going to be a crazy masked maniac or something on the loose as well that she knows nothing about. But yeah, then you start picking up on that kind of thing, and you're like, hang on, because they
Yes.
do kind of start to say like as the days go on, Muffy is starting to act a bit strange. She's dressing different, and someone goes on about her shoes or something.
Well, yeah, and she just switched. There's a point at which you think, oh,
The bit
she's
in the
proper.
morning, they come down in the morning and her hair, and she's like in the kitchen making a coffee or something, and her hair's all over the place, and then she hears someone come in, so she goes running out. That's kind of weird.
That's right. Yeah, that's a shift, isn't it? That's where you realize something was is majorly up. Yeah, I think it's all really well done, and I think she's great,
Yes.
and and the tension is there, and it's got creepy dolls and hints of some weird shit. And then, of course, at a certain stage, I guess, heading towards the kind of the big reveal. There's the reveal of Buffy.
Yes. Crazy, crazy Buffy. Muffy and Buffy, the crazy evil twin sister.
Yes, which is the trope, which is not only the kind of escaped mental patient slasher movie trope, which is in so many of them, but the evil twin is something. Uh, Daphne Zuniga in the initiation, the twist in that one, which was before this one, is that it's her evil twin. She's a heroine, but it's her evil twin, not Muffy,
Mm,
but I think something equally silly. Um, so there's a few slashers with evil twins. There's quite a few horror films, good twin, bad twin.
yeah.
Um, and I always quite like that idea. Um, and it means Deborah Foreman gets to have more fun playing this alleged twin sister. Um, and so, what do you think about the whole the big reveal and
I
the
think it.
which
Oh, I
is
think it's
the last
brilliant.
section, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think it's absolutely brilliant because even like the first time watching it, I was absolutely not expecting it. I'm one of them gullible people. I notice little things
Hmm.
like that, but I don't actually twig that could be something to remember for future. So you get really engrossed in Kit and Rob trying to escape, and you think for like a brief second that they're actually going to do it, and then they get kind of trapped in the kitchen and separated. And as soon as Kit busts into the sitting room, and all of her friends are just sat there, just chilling out, like reading comics and having a bit of a quiet chat to each other. She's like, what the actual fuck's going on? And you do the same. You're like, hang on a minute. I thought these guys were
Yeah.
dead. Is this some
Yes.
kind of like weird, surreal, like mind trip going on? And then
And it
everyone
holds on
just
that for a
starts
while, doesn't
laughing.
it?
Yeah,
Before they laugh. Yeah.
it's awkward. Yeah, it is. It is awkward and it's weird and it's surreal. Um, but it's also really great as well. I mean, quite a lot of the time, I'm all for like really like bad endings, and not bad endings, just grim endings, where there isn't a happy ending. To me, horror films shouldn't have happy endings, but then when that happens, you're just like, ah, it was all a joke all along, just a complete prank. And it really worked really well because Rob is still shut in the cupboard, absolutely cacking his pants.
He's the one that really freaks out, isn't he?
He
Well, yeah,
really
he
freaks
has the
out.
screaming abdabs. Yeah, yeah, the
It's
stoic kind
great.
of
I
character.
love it. It's a really good reveal. It's funny. It's light-hearted and really well done. But yeah, you would be absolutely mortified if one of your friends did that to you.
Yes, that's the other end of it, isn't it? That it was an unforgivable and possibly something that might drive you to stab them yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
What about
which
you? What did you think?
no, I
Did you
loved
see
it.
it
Yeah,
coming?
no, not at all. No, I mean,
Hooray!
even though I was really young when I first watched this, I'm sure I wouldn't have guessed it. Even now if I watched it for the first time. Um, I'm just not good at guessing that kind of thing.
No, me
But
neither.
even though it's probably plainly obvious, but I suppose it is. It's been done. Guess it had been done. Similar things. The shaggy dog joke of where
Yeah.
nothing is as it seems has been done more since this came out. I think back in '86, since this came out, we've had loads of those. He was dead all along type twist endings, and the twist ending became, almost ridiculous when you got to stuff like
Mm.
Secret Window. Oh, it's actually, oh, it's him. It was him. There is no twin, or there is no, he is dead. Um, so that's been worn into the ground. But I think it was quite ahead of its time in going for this kind of very audacious twist, because it is a big cheat on the audience, because
Yeah, massively.
which is why it's good, but it's also,
Mm.
you set up for a slasher movie and it isn't one. It is a
Mm.
stage slasher movie, but it's very aware of itself. So it's a horror movie where what we thought were the victims actually peel off their own special effects. They peel off the prosthetics to say, no, it was, look, it's me.
Yeah.
I'm alive, which is quite cool, because it's almost like, within the film itself, it's almost like a peek behind the scenes of how they did the makeup. To watch a
Yes.
apparent victim take off his stick-on prosthetic, which I
Yes.
think it's really cool, especially for this era when it was all about that. We're reading
Mm.
Fangoria and seeing how these things are done, Tom Savini era. Um, yeah, no, it's super well done. Muffy plays it. Deborah Foreman plays it really well. The humor of I forget which character it is that kind of fools around with the fake severed head. There's some joking around with the severed head, which kind of
Yes.
giving himself a blowjob. I think it's Chaz, actually.
It's Chaz,
Um,
yeah.
Obviously, and
Of
the
course.
the fact that Arch, seriously or not, reveals that he shit himself is a good one, I think.
Yeah.
Um, the questions it raises about how it was all staged is fascinating, because it's such a big ruse. How she managed to pull it off, um, is something that I was thinking about quite a lot, in terms of at what stage, what stage were they all in on it except for Rob and Amy Steele.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
you think they're not actually in on it until like right at the end. That's kind of
yes,
how I understood it. But yeah, you then kind of think, so how that's why they cut away when they did.
yeah, because I guess Arch is really scared. He's wandering into the woods. He's menaced by that snake, and then I guess then she appears to explain what's happening, and
Yeah,
he has to go away for a bit and hide himself.
yeah, yeah.
Well, they all do, don't they? And Skip, I guess, having to stage that thing of where he's under the
So
boathouse.
yeah, because he goes
That's a real
first, so
leap.
he's out of it for most of it. But I suppose the awkwardest one was probably Chaz, who has his knob cut off basically, or you don't see it happen. He's just lying on the bed in his gimp mask with his hands over his crotch, and then when he
Yes,
moves
he
his
is.
hands,
Yeah.
his knob's gone. And it's like, well, how did they manage to get him to do that? Obviously, he was in on
Yes.
it by then, but
It relies on a seamless thing of everything going right, which I guess is the whole point, isn't it? Because she's
yeah,
doing the great reveal, I think, on top of the reveal, is that it's because she's a entrepreneur. She's planning to turn this mansion into a murder
yeah,
mystery weekend that she can, charge people to come and play, which is again maybe ahead of its time, because those things exist. Those things are quite popular now. Murder mystery weekends
mm.
have been for some time. Um, so I
Yeah,
think
potentially
that's
not so much back then though.
no, I don't think so. I mean, and it makes sense that it would come off so well, because this is her obsession, I guess. This is her life's work, maybe because she's a
Hmm.
born prankster. She is unhinged for whatever reason.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but she's a perfectionist, so I guess this is years of work, uh, getting this to actually be successful. Um,
Yeah, and you are
so
still
I think
left
it's great.
thinking, even by the end of it, is there a Buffy?
Well, yeah, and I think the last, because you have the big reveal and you assume that's it, because it's the biggest twist they could possibly have pulled off, isn't it? The whole thing is this. But then I think the last few minutes are actually quite creepy, because it pulls back, really, doesn't it? Because it has a kind of double fake out, which is,
Hmm.
um, Muffy's there, and you think, oh Jesus, Nan, who's the quiet one, who is the one most likely to be genuinely disturbed by this because of the baby thing.
Mm.
She stages her own prank, which is a very gruesome one, which is slashing Muffy's throat, but cleverly with another prosthetic. Um,
Yes.
and there's a couple of looks in those final moments, and because it's such a weird kind of double twist, it does end, I think, on a genuinely kind of, oh no, there's nothing
Sinister
funny
note.
about the ending.
Yeah. No.
There's nothing light about it, is there? There's the sense of, well, someone's coming out of this not good. Whether it's whether Muffy is in all of her pranks and stuff is not actually really stable at all, or whether Nan has been sent over the edge by this child related trauma that was exploited for the prank.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's a nice touch. It doesn't have a jokey ending. It has a jokey twist, but the ending is actually a bit sinister.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool. It's very well done.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's well, the cool thing is it's by Fred Walton. It's directed by Fred Walton, who directed what I always thought was one of the best straight sort of slasher films, When a Stranger Calls, which is really good, which is the
Mhm.
classic um opening section where the calls are coming from inside the house. Have you checked the children? Um, with the babysitter. One of the scariest opening acts of all time is in When a Stranger Calls, um, where of course you couldn't do it now, but the twist is have you checked the children? And the police trace the calls, and the calls are coming from inside the house, and the
Dun,
killers
dun.
killed the kids. That's the twist in the first 20 minutes. So yeah, so he's pulled off twists like that before, and I think this was a good choice that he's able to bring a kind of sinister edge to something that's not quite a spoof, because it's not a spoof, but it's a sort of a joke on the slasher audience, really.
Yeah. It's a prank within a prank within a prank. Because it's April
Yeah,
Fool's Day.
yeah. It's a really good movie. I think it's maybe still underrated,
Yeah,
um,
very much so.
because it is
More
an odd one
people.
out.
Mm. But it is still it kind of like embodies all that is 80s. It's got some great costumes, some great characters, some very good looking characters as well.
Very attractive. Yeah, Chaz is very attractive, I think.
He is.
Yeah, that guy, I forgot what else that guy was in. Clayton Roner is his name. I think he's definitely got a face of someone that was in a few of those movies. Um, Deborah Foreman, as we said, is in a bunch of them. Thomas F. Wilson as Arch was, apart from Back to the Future, he was in a few. Yeah, an unusually good cast, I think, of proper actors rather than sort of, ones they grab because they were attractive or whatever.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and probably a decade too early, I think, is the thing with it,
Yes.
because like with a few of them, there's a film called Evil Laugh that came out the same year, which is very much, self-aware, and characters are talking about being in a horror movie while they're being killed.
Mm.
Um, they did this and that, and a few others did predict what came in the 90s when they were, they were doing it with Scream and everything. But yeah, any more thoughts about April Fool's Day?
No, I think that's about it really. I mean, it is good fun. I've watched it a couple of times now, and every time I notice something different, or you forget about a bit, and you're like, oh yeah, that happens. Um, yeah, it's good fun, and it's good. It's got a great twist. Um, I do find like sometimes the kind of slasher movies can get very samey, very similar very quickly. This one is kind of like a take on something different, makes it a little bit more interesting with a bit more humor in it without being like slapstick and silly. It still has like you kind of like jokey and jokes, that you play on your friends when you're at home type thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and a lot the failing of a lot of the later slasher movies is just not having likable characters. I think
Yeah.
in horror a lot actually in recent years. I think, but this and indeed the Friday movies and the really good slasher movies, I think that's what sets them apart and why they hold up is because it's actually a bunch of people you quite like hanging around with.
Yeah.
Um, which seems to have got forgotten at some stage. You know,
Yeah, I don't quite know what happened where they then decided they're just going to go for like supermodel looking people that have no
yeah, because no one cares
personality.
about them. Yeah,
No.
exactly. Yeah, and talking of which, Sarah, there was a remake of April
Oh,
Fool's Day.
was there?
Yeah, I shit you.
Oh no. When was
Yeah.
this?
Oh, it never happened. Yeah, no,
It-
there was. It did happen. Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, so yeah, so stuff happens. No one, sadly, no one really, apart from fans of a certain, no one really, I think, was kind of talking about April Fool's Day 1986, even though it was probably, one of the stronger ones from the second half of the 80s. But still, it had some name value because they remade it, Sarah. They remade it. See, as we've
Yay.
been through before, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, which we did a show about, was a huge hit. So they began remaking lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of horror movies, particularly slasher movies, particularly things from the 70s and 80s, and the Rob Zombie kind of stuff fed into that as well. So we had everything. I mean, it's mental, really. There was a remake of Friday the 13th, obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street, which was shit. Um,
Yeah.
really terrible, really embarrassing. That really can forward to the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. It's just rubbish. Just and that maybe is a good example of totally obnoxious characters that you couldn't wait to get killed off. Texas Chainsaw was a good remake. Hills Have Eyes had a good remake. Prom Night had a kind of PG-13, like you were suggesting, America's Next Top Model cast.
Yeah.
Train was remade. A whole bunch of the slashers were remade. And April Fool's Day was remade by the Butcher Brothers. Um, I can't remember if that's their real name. I doubt it.
No, I don't even think they're related, but I had to look them up because I was like, oh, I've heard of these guys before. I'm sure they've done something. And like movie wise, they haven't done anything that I've gone, oh, I really love that film. But I did find out that they did the video to Static X's Destroyer back in
Ah,
2007, which is brilliant. It's kind of like a roller derby, a female team of roller derbies just like having a massive like fight with each other, and Wayne Static's kind of like the announcer in the middle called Dick Hertz. It's kind of comical and kind of amusing, and it's just a good video. But then they went on to make April Fool's Day remake. They should have stuck with music videos.
yes, exactly. Yeah. That was quite a lot, isn't it? Like, in music, it happens a lot. The Righteous Brothers were neither righteous and they weren't brothers either.
It's all a
Um,
lie.
it's a sham. I haven't checked with the Pointer Sisters. I don't know.
No.
Uh, the Everly Brothers, I can't remember if they're actually brothers. But yeah, there's certainly a bunch of brothers that aren't actually brothers, and they don't even have the name. And obviously, they're not called Butcher. They're like John Smith and Red
Yeah,
Bull.
no, that they have completely unrelated names.
Yes, exactly. The remake of April Fool's Day 2008, it went straight to DVD,
Thank God.
which makes sense.
Would you have gone and seen it if you'd heard
The
it was going to be in the cinema?
tragic thing is probably yes, because
Mm,
I mean, there was a lot of, well, like now, I suppose we've gone through periods of
yeah.
like not much horror and then a lot of horror at the cinema. There was kind of a lot of horror in that period where remakes were coming out,
Hmm.
and I was a sucker for it. I was By that time I was driving, and I could go to the cinema whenever I wanted. But yeah, probably
Yeah.
would have done. Tragically, I didn't see the Prom Night remake in the cinema. I'm not quite sure why. There was a Stepfather remake, which I think I did see at the cinema. But a lot of those things I saw. Um, and in a lot of cases, actually, they were quite decent. Like we said, the Elm Street remake wasn't good, but the Friday one was really fun, and quite a few of them were
Mm-hmm.
just sort of entertaining. There was a remake of House on Sorority Row, just called Sorority Row, which I quite liked,
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
Carrie Fisher, amongst others. So probably the ratio wasn't bad in terms of good to bad. But this one's just, this one has the unforgivable sin of just being quite dull, really.
Mm.
It's got Scout Taylor Compton. I always want to say Thompson, but it's Scout Taylor Compton, isn't it? Yes, Scout Taylor
Yes.
Compton. God damn it. Who's an interesting character. I mean, I don't dislike her actually. As may have said before, I'm a big fan of the Rob Zombie Halloween films.
Yeah.
I actually prefer those I do like the recent ones, but I prefer the Rob Zombie ones to the most recent three that came out. Um, and although I suppose she's done quite a lot of less good films, but I actually think she's quite good as Laurie, especially in Halloween 2, where she plays Laurie as a realistic Laurie in the sense that she's totally lost it. She's a drug addict. She's given up. She's very unsympathetic because she's suffering obviously from having gone through a life ruining event.
Hmm.
And I actually think she plays that well. A lot of people found her really grating and annoying, but that's the whole point with Halloween 2. You know, she has immense PTSD, as you
Hmm.
probably would if you spent a whole night seeing your friends get killed and almost dying yourself. So I think she's possibly an actress that has been underrated. Otherwise, I don't think I recognise anyone else.
Mm.
Um, it's a kind of slick, uh, looks like some kind of TV movie. It looks slick in a very dull kind of way. Um, everybody looks like you were saying. Actually, everybody looks sort of the
Yeah, like
same.
supermodels, and it's all
Yeah,
ridiculously overproduced. It just looks fake as well, doesn't it?
yeah, and I think, I mean, this isn't just with this one, but because, you know, as we know, posters these days for movies are utter dog shit. You know, they are things
Mm.
that anyone could do with Photoshop.
Yeah.
Hardly ever use artwork anymore. Mostly it's a picture of a few of the actors looking serious against a Photoshop background. And if the actors are over the age of 30, they've been Photoshopped themselves to take away any wrinkles, to
Yeah.
give them a smooth face, like the face that I saw today of Jennifer Aniston on a bus with Adam Sandler, looking like CGI versions of themselves for a movie that looks absolutely awful. That's coming to Netflix that no one in their right mind would watch. They don't even look like human beings. What if you know? Jennifer Aniston isn't hideous. I mean, she's probably 50, but I mean, you know, can we
Yeah.
just tell her what
No.
she is? Um, she looks like a 50-year-old. Well, she is a 50-year-old woman.
Yeah.
That's shocking. Um, Ridiculous. And then the posters for things like April Fool's Days, you know, no one would, on the strength of the poster for this, would go and say, God, that looks good. Those heads look fantastic. This looks really good.
Oh yeah.
Whereas if you look at the poster for the original April Fool's Day, it's actually quite cool because it's
Yeah, it's
Muffy.
weird
It's really good, isn't it? It's
with a
Muffy
kind of
facing.
noose in her
Yes,
hair.
that's right. Yeah, and she's got the
It's quite
knife behind her
sinister.
back,
Yeah.
and it sums up the tone of the film really well because it's sort of it conveys a sense of this might not be entirely serious, but there's also a noose and a knife in the picture. So you know,
Yeah.
whereas this is just, you know, this really is closer to things like Cruel Intentions than it is to a horror movie. I mean, the poster is like Cruel Intentions. The film plays out like that. Um, Although obviously Muffy was a wealthy kind of strange kid in this mansion. This is very much set in the kind of is it California or somewhere, but it's set amongst
Hmm.
the elite and a very boring person. There's a party for, I think it's Scout Taylor Compton. It's a party for her at this mansion, Southern Mansion. Loads of the prankery of the early one. There's a staged kind of thing where someone falls off a balcony and they seem to have died, which is a joke. The difference with this one, I suppose, the narrative's a little different. The joke with the kind of stage fatality from the balcony sort of has a lasting effect because it cuts to a year later, and the people that survived the prank gone wrong come back, and then someone starts killing them off. So it's
Mm.
a very traditional slasher movie. In other
Yeah.
words, like in Slaughter High, actually, prank goes wrong, someone actually dies for real, as well as the fake
Mm.
stuff, and then they're reunited a bit later, and then the killer, presumably seeking revenge, bumps them off.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That is more of your kind of typical slasher thing going on.
it is, but of course, the very, very contrived way of linking this to the original is that, wouldn't you know it, all of the murders were in April Fool. Like my old boots. Um, and I suppose a little different to the remake. So it is still exposed as, you know, the 1 year later murders are all a spoof. The one difference is that there is then a genuine murder at the very end. So, you know, someone truly is unhinged, which is hinted at in the original, as we said. Muffy and Nan
Hmm.
maybe are unhinged by everything, but you don't actually ever see a proper murder. But in this, it does deliver a proper murder. Um, it's just also boring. I mean, it's bland. It looks like any other film from that time that you'd have seen on TV. There's no one to sympathise with. Everyone's a bit of a shit, and
Yeah.
there is a sense it might be trying to sort of make a point about the elite, about the rich, and the world in which it unfolds is obviously, you know, the higher end, but you still need someone to root for, and there isn't, and it's not really a horror film either because it doesn't have the suspense that the original has, or the creepy bits that really make the spoofery prank stuff work really well. So yeah, I don't really know. There's not really anything much to say about the 2008. It's just one of those dull ones, unfortunately.
Mm. They just didn't go down too well. One of those ones that didn't hit the mark. And there was no Buffy
Well,
or
there's
Muffy.
a Muffy Buffy. I've forgotten who played, but there is a Muffy Buffy character, but it's not, and she's
Yeah,
still a
but it's
wealthy,
yeah, she's not called Muffy though.
but she's not, yeah, she's just a version of the Deborah Foreman, you know,
A very bad
and she's not likable.
fake version.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, I haven't actually seen the remake because I don't really want to pay any money to watch it. And the only way I can watch it is by renting it or something. And I was just like, no, I'm not going to go there. So I sat and kind of watched the kills and stuff. And it just seemed to be a lot of her running around in high heels. from a kind of stalker in the shadows. It didn't ring, I didn't get any of the lightheartedness. I didn't get any of the pranks that you do
No.
with the original. There didn't seem to be anything like that. It all seemed kind of bitchy and bitter and snobby,
Yeah. Which
which is
is, yeah.
completely not the way the original is. They did
No.
completely miss a massive point of the original movie, which is why remakes can go so horribly wrong, I guess. If people don't, the vision isn't there, they don't actually get what it was about
Yeah.
and try to reinvent it in this way and just completely miss the mark.
Totally. And of course, the thing you can't recreate, I suppose you could try, is the stuff that we really enjoy now about the original, which is the 80s charm, all the denim and all that stuff,
Yeah, and the white fronts.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
The white fronts and the
I think
gimp
they're coming
mask.
back. The gimp mask. Who doesn't have a gimp mask from the 80s? I mean, honestly, Nan wore that all the time. My Nan, not Nan in the film. Yeah, it was just at Christmas. I mean, that's it, isn't it? This is just charm. No one will ever remember the 2008 April Fool's Day, and as I said, it feels more like a cruel intent. It feels more like Cruel Intentions 3. That's how boring it is than it does actually a horror remake. There's no real horror in it, really. I mean, it wouldn't scare a fly. There's no suspense or anything. But the original's got charm. It's got some tension. It works
Yeah.
really well. So yeah.
It's got some good suspense, it's got some good visuals, whereas this one doesn't really seem to have any of them. Again, it kind of like, by the looks of things, they try and do things off screen with some of the kills and stuff. I saw the electrocution one from the
No, yeah.
remake. You don't really get to see anything of it. You just know that she's been electrocuted. They kind of set things up in a Final Destination way for
Yes.
the
Yeah.
electrocution bit as well. It's like, is anything original in, do you have an original thought in your brain as to how you're going to do this, or are we just going to take bits from other movies?
Pretty much. Yeah. It's a bit of a shame. But it was just pointless endeavor. I don't think it was ever going to be a big hit, even if it was a good movie. I just don't really get what they were going for, except a lazy kind of cash in because they could. I guess
Yeah,
I
just
suppose the rights were available and it was an easy one to kind of fashion a new story around. I get that. Um, yeah,
yeah.
well, that's
So
really it, I think. Oh
I was
yes.
going to say, as this is kind of like another kind of remake versus original, can I ask which one's your favourite?
What a tough one.
Do I need to
Sometimes,
ask?
sometimes this is difficult, isn't it? Like we've had some interesting remake versus original. And I think there are ones where you could easily, almost say,
Excuse me.
where you could easily, that's okay, where you could easally and convincingly argue some remakes are better, and we know that's the case with some of them.
Some of them, yeah.
Um, yeah, I actually think the Hills Have Eyes remake it's not better, but it's not far off. I don't think in terms of that kind of thing. And obviously, The Thing is a classic example of the
Oh
Fly as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Uh, but then they brought such different things to it. There's such a contrast in the approach of things like The Thing and The Fly compared to the originals. They are very different while working on the same kind of concept. But yeah, with this one, it's obviously the 80s one. Yeah, there's no
Most
contest.
definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I wonder what she's getting up to these days, like the real Muffy Buffy. I hope she's okay.
Yeah, me too.
Worry about her. Deborah Foreman, I think, got out of the business. I think she does other stuff now. I don't think she acts. I don't think she's acted for ages, which is a shame because she's really good. Yeah. Wow. I think that's it. All
Yeah.
in time for the. Do check out the 80s one. It's available through different channels and whatsits and things, and it's well
Yeah,
worth
definitely.
a brisk hour and a half.
Yeah. And get you kind of like some ideas for impending April Fool's Days.
Yes, get those crying baby tapes set up for those people that have suffered terrible loss.
Spring load your chair legs
Yes,
and hide some gimp masks around.
people love that stuff. Yeah. The gimp masks. Yeah. I wonder how many things in real life where a prank has gone horribly wrong to the point where someone goes nuts. If someone touches a nerve that bad, the badly judged prank. Um, Presume at some stage, especially in America, I guess at some stage a prank's gone wrong and someone's had their head blown off. Because that kind of
Yeah.
happens every day there anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Little
true.
Jimmy's playing with the gun. His daddy left the cabinet open. Yeah. Be
Yep,
interested.
happens
Do
all the
write
time.
in. Do write in.
Do let us know
Email
what
in.
you're going to be doing for this April Fool's Day. And how
Yes.
old were you when you discovered it was only half a day?
Yes, that's weird, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know who invented that. I don't know why it stops at 12. Or what
I'm kind
happens
of
if you
glad it
do
does.
stage a prank after 12. Yeah, because it's too
Yeah.
much work, isn't it? Otherwise, you're like, oh, yeah, fire alarm's going off. Oh, it's just a prank. Oh, it's
And then
not.
you're like, hang on, it's 1:30. Shit, there is a fire.
Shit, Maureen from accounts is on fire. Um, Always embarrassing. Then it's too late and face has been burned off. It's a
Mm.
tragedy. But next time we've got something much more fun than the April Fool's Day shitty remake. What have we got next time, Sarah? Episode 39 hits the screens in April the something, the end of April. It is.
Return of the Living Dead.
Yes,
More
indeed.
80s zombie goodness.
Actually, yes.
3 mostly good films with a brief mention of the other 2, I'm assuming.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's two
But
great ones. I haven't seen part two for ages, but it's probably good. It's probably fine.
there's
Um,
3 great ones and 2 not so great ones. But,
yeah,
going on what we've just been talking about with the remake of April Fool's Day, I would much rather watch Return of the Living Dead 4 or 5 than sit
and
and
that's
watch
saying
that.
a lot. Yes, yes,
Yeah, no,
exactly.
it's very exciting. Next episode is going to be very, very good. Looking forward to it. Love my zombie movies. And it'll be just in time for
Yes,
Zombie Awareness Month.
yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. Zombies are indeed people too.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, yeah. What kind of what pronouns do Zombies use? Do they have a designated pronoun?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure on that. I'm guessing they're all gender fluid.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah,
guessing there's
you'd
a lot of
think
fluids.
it's gender extremely fluid. Gonna need a
They
mop.
don't care. They don't care. They don't worry
They
about
don't
that kind of
care.
crap.
No, death's too short to worry about that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a real classic. Return of the Living Dead 1985, one of the best soundtracks of
Most
any film
definitely.
from that period. Um, Fantastic. Still remember vividly watching it for the first time in the 80s with the great, I think it's Graham Humphrey's cover of the video in the UK.
Yeah.
Fantastic artwork. Um, but yeah, fantastic. And then of course, Return of the Living Dead 3 is a fantastic film in its own right. A tragic Romeo and Juliet kind of thing. It's just the best. Was
So good.
obsessed with Mindy Clark from the third one with her ahead of her time with the body piercing and everything.
Yep.
Man.
Yep.
And the pain
Yep.
of being dead.
So many
Yes.
quotes, so many amazing quotes, and so influential to movies and bands, and still to this day, everyone's still going on
Yes.
about it. So we thought it was definitely time that we went on about it for a bit.
Yes. And is it true? Oh, maybe we should say that. But is it true that I often think the first Return of the Living Dead, is it the lightest film that has the most downbeat ending? Because it's a comedy much of the time, but then
Oh, most of the
the ending
time,
is a
yeah.
total bum note. As is this terribly sad bit with the zombie lady, with the half lady. Yeah,
Yeah, the pain of being dead. Yeah.
that's harrowing. Yeah, I think that's how you do a horror comedy. And of course, part three is not a comedy
Absolutely.
at all. Um,
No, but still, it's they kind of did the same thing with the Wreck movies, didn't they?
yes, yes, very much so.
You know,
Rec
two,
3, still my favorite one.
absolutely. So it would. We should probably leave this for the next episode. But would Return of the Living Dead 3 be your favourite? We will find out in the next episode, I guess.
Oh, what a cliffhanger. This is like Jack Bauer in
Yeah,
whenever Jack Bauer was around.
it is.
Yes. Oh, wait. Yes. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's a
we'll
tricky
have
one,
to we'll
actually.
have to do a little rundown of our favourites.
Yeah, I'm feeling it could go either way, maybe. Um, maybe. Although, yeah, that's a tricky one. Would seem maybe possibly impossible. But yes, we'll be doing the Return of the Living Dead series, mostly one, two, and three, when you rejoin us at the end of April. Until then, that's it, Sarah. It's good
That
night
is.
from me.
And good night for me.
Marvelous. Thank you very much. Have a good April Fool's Day. Don't do any weird shit. And see you next time.